Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Rodolphe Frerejean Frere Taittinger out in France. Introductions in just a moment. Have a listen or watch a previous episode with Angela McCrae. She is the CEO of the African American Vintners Association. They're having a big event in Napa this year. I'm going to visit, but it's a very interesting journey for her to get to the position she's in, and as well for Black African American vintners. Also, I had an episode with Marinella Ardelin, and she is a PhD, but a specialist in Romanian wine. And I had an incredible conversation with her because I pulled out my father's newsletter from 1981, and we started talking about the Romanian wines of the Soviet era. I think you'll find it fascinating, but not why we're here today. Here to talk to Rodolphe Frerejean Frere Taittinger. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Glad to be here with you today.
Thank you. So we were talking about your status in life. You're the CEO of French Bloom, which is a non-alcoholic sparkling wine. We're going to talk about that. Maybe it's champagne, actually. And you're the co-founder of Frerejean Frere Champagne.
Yes, sir.
Did I say that right?
You say it properly, and I know it's not that easy to say.
Well, Frere being brother, and Jean Frere being your surname. And so brothers, I suppose then you started this with your brothers.
Yeah. The name. So for my mother, I'm from Taittinger family. For my father, we're from Burgundy. So, we carry a lot of wine in our blood. And so my ancestors were making cannons for Napoleon. And the name on the cannons were Frerejean Frere. So, in 2005, we decided with my two brothers to create our own artisanal boutique of champagne. We're in Avis, which is a Grand Cru terroir nearby Celos and a few very nice growers. And so we decided to create our own champagne house in 2005. Now it's been almost like 19 years that we are doing our champagne. So we are, it's a very interesting project.
So Burgundy, this is some French wine pedigree here. We have a Burgundian. And was he in the wine trade when you lived in? Did you live in Burgundy, or just your father was born there?
Yeah. My father is born there. We're in south of Burgundy. So I always grow up nearby vineyards in Burgundy, nearby vineyards in Champagne also. So and it's very interesting because the way we actually make our champagne at Frerejean Frere, we take a lot of Burgundy visions. We age our wine in Burgundy barrels. We use Pinot Noir and Chardonnay almost only. We do very long aging. We try to speak about the land, the terroir. So we make champagne. Champagne is a remarkable wine of celebrations, but we believe it's first a beautiful wine. So the way we make our champagne at Frerejean Frere is definitely to go back to really the wine aspect and this is the way.
I made a huge mistake, and I'm a huge fan of champagne as a beverage, not just for celebration, as you mentioned. In fact, I kind of learned that from your cousin Clovis when he brought it up, when I brought up the champagne celebration thing. But I taught my daughter, my oldest daughter, and her husband about champagne, and now it's costing me a fortune. So for the listeners, I'd like to lay out for the listeners, the lay of the land when it comes to Paris, Champagne, because we're going to be in Paris in the end of May. We're going to take probably a day trip out to Champagne. It's almost due east of Paris, right? And
yeah, it's only 2 hours. We would love to have you actually when you come to Champagne.
Well, I appreciate that. Take a train, drive there, either way.
Yeah, so we usually take a train on the way back because we are too to drive.
I guess that's good policy.
Yeah.
But I mean, like if you took a train, it's a 2-hour ride, you're saying, visit the town. Is it land in, where is it, Laurence or
my cousins Clovis with Champagne Taittinger, they are in Reims. We are in Avize with my two brothers. So Avize is 10 kilometers south of Épernay. It's a village of Grand Cru, where we're in the kingdom of the Chardonnay, Grand Cru. So it's very beautiful. It's more like a terroir approach, but it's really worth to come also to see that.
So, let's talk about that for a second because, Napa, California, most of my listeners have been or, want to go. They'll see these different regions like Oakville, and they'll see Mayacamas Mountains, and they'll see Rutherford, and the appellations in Napa are sort of less defined terroir-wise. It's a little more difficult, though there are differences. But, France is all about terroir, and particularly that part of France, the Épernay, Avis, Reims. You said Reims, and I used to say Reims, and I was corrected it was Reims, and now I'm saying Reims again. So maybe
I say Reims, but my wife is American, so I say Reims to her. So I start to say also Reims.
so then, of course, you drive down to Burgundy, which is quite a drive, I think. And of course, terroir and l'appellation is très important pour the vin de Bourgogne. Donc, I started speaking French. But is it harder with sparkling wine, in this case champagne, to express terroir because of the bubbles and because of the acid?
The big maison of champagne compares themselves to orchestra. They really see themselves as an orchestra because they're going to mix 100, sometimes 200 different tones, different wine, different type of cepage. At Frerejean Frere, we see ourselves more like a small jazz band. So our visions, which is closer to terroir, is we don't try to mix everything. Our grapes just come from like 7 villages, who are 80% of them are in Grand Cru. So Grand Cru is really 1% of the best grapes in Champagne. So Avis, Cramant, Ménil-Séroger, Chouilly, Ambonnet, those beautiful terroirs. And so the idea is to really, I love jazz. And so like in a jazz band, you need to have a saxo, you need to have, the bass, you need to have like all those instruments who play together. So we don't try to have too many instruments, and sometimes we're just going to play the saxophone, for example, with we have a cuvée named VV26, which is a beautiful Blanc de Blanc. I would love to show you next time I see you. Perhaps next week because I'm going to California. Mm-hmm. But we have the VV26, which is a Blanc de Blanc from one single parcel in Cramant. Wow. And the oldest vine is from 1926. So you have this 1 hectare, and the age of those old vineyards is from 100 years. So, and we just takes the wine from just this parcel. So this is really the concept of terroir, which is very much normally what Burgundy is made from, not necessarily what Champagne is made for, and so I just go back to that because I think it's an interesting point.
It is.
Burgundy has been making wines for thousands of years, but in Burgundy, it used to be mostly farmers, mostly family who just have a small plot, On the other side, in Burgundy, in Champagne, Champagne has been made, and you were showing me the book of Veuve Clicquot. Champagne has been made by talented entrepreneurs, by business people, by businesswomen like Veuve Clicquot, by businessmen like Moet, and those businessmen were really making big brand, But since 20 years, in Champagne, there is a little revolutions. We call the quiet revolutions with my brothers, which is kind of like the rise of smaller growers, like Celos, like Agrapar, or maison, or smaller maison with a character, with personality, who are making wine of Champagne, which is a different approach than just making champagne, but we are making wine of Champagne with personality, terroir base, with character, with this idea of speaking about the land more than just creating a house style. The big maisons, they create a house style. When you're drinking Bollinger, you're drinking the style of Bollinger. Paul Roger is the style of Paul Roger. But when you're going to drink a small growers, you are going to drink the seasonality, you are going to drink the taste of his small parcel, the components of this, and almost like the entire ecosystem inside the terroir and the parcel. You know what I mean?
You know, that is a fascinating description, and thank you for that, because the champagne industry is huge. The French in general, but the champagne industry has done a great job of making one feel connected to their brand. And I showed you the Veuve Clicquot book. You know, there's a reason for that. She was an entrepreneur herself as well. You said that as business.
Absolutely.
But your cousin's brand, Taittinger, Bollinger, Paul Roger, Charles Heidsieck, Piper Heidsieck, all these big brands that consume so much of this shelf at the supermarché. Are they competition because they are house styles? Like you're going to buy a bottle of Bollinger because you know that Bollinger tastes. Let's talk about Veuve Clicquot for a second. They buy Veuve Clicquot because that gold label sticks out in everybody's mind, and I don't think they necessarily are looking for the house brand. They're just looking at that label. And here you have this very unique terroir-driven wine. Do you consider them competition besides the sheer volume of business they do? As a beverage, do you consider them competition?
I mean, you know, I'm not here to criticize the.
No, I don't want you to.
The big maisons are necessary because they drive very much also the champagne appellations. When I'm going to Japan, when I'm going to the US, when I'm going to China, when I'm going everywhere, it's true that the power of those big firms like LVMH, Bian, or even my cousin at Taittinger or Bollinger, they are so powerful and they bring the champagne appellations to become so famous and which is a good thing. What we are doing with my brothers, or it's kind of like more like a grower type of maison with terroir visions. It's a different vision. It's not the same type of competitions or war. The big maisons, they're going to create a style which is a little bit more standardized. So people are buying a bottle of Veuve Clicquot because they want, I believe, in my point of view, they want to also feel the same type of expressions and the same feeling, which is something like also interesting because, they're looking for having stability in a standardized way, Right. We believe a bit the opposite with my brother, since perhaps the Burgundy side inside our blood who's talking, where we believe that every year are very different. And we are very interested to see that the 2012 for us is super different from 2008, or when you speak about certain type of terroir, you're going to get something very different. And it's true that when you mix all the terroir and when you make millions of bottles, you create more something standardized. And sometimes it can be very good also. I'm so impressed by the quality sometimes of some great house champagne, because they have been able, even making millions of bottles, but still able to keep like a very high quality of a standardized type of product. We really want to be the voice of the terroir. We want to be the voice of the seasonality. 2012 for us, for example, we had a very cold winter, under 20 degrees. We had a very warm early spring, so we had a flowering way too early. Then we lost 70% of the grapes because we get frost.
Wow.
So the style of our 2012 is full of tensions, precisions, because of this very hard, struggling year, But this is what we like to put in front, the typicity and the diversity of the expressions of the terroir and the seasonality.
It's so interesting because and I think I brought it up a little bit before, but the idea of the Cliquots and the Boulangers and the Paul Rogers, they still feel pretty unique. Like if I go to the market and they're in the locked cabinet, but when it comes to the market, they are much like the regular brands of Cabernet Sauvignon that we have on the shelf in LA. And so it's what fascinates me about the industry of champagne. It's able to elevate its position in the consumer's perception, and justifiably. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, because it's such a wonderful beverage, but it's just interesting that the mainstream huge houses still feel like something unique and private.
Agreed.
When you are unique and private. And I can't wait to taste the wines. Who's a supplier in Southern California? But you said Boisson, no?
Also French Bloom, huh? Which is
so who's a supplier of Frerejean Frere?
So Frerejean Frere, we have an importer based in Texas named BCI, and he's doing a really good job. We work after with Winebow. I don't know if you know Winebow.
Okay. Right.
We worked with Winebow. He's kind of like one of our main distributors also in US. They're doing a great job.
So, and this kind of leads into this next question, which is really fascinating because you sent me your schedule, and I'm like looking at it, oh my gosh, this is a whirlwind to get the name out. And there's something unique in the industry right now, and because I'm retired to the extent that I don't sell wine every day anymore, I'm on a lot of consulting jobs to help people understand the landscape of wine and distilled spirits in America, and let alone California. And, it's tough right now all over. And it seems like what you're going to do on this next trip is critical to the marketing of your brand, that you are in front of the people and pouring the glasses and having this conversation.
Yes. It's super important. You have to meet the client. It's a people industry, the wine world. So it's all about meeting the people, and we get so disconnected. I feel with like the COVID and all of that. It's super important to really like reconnect, to meet the clients, to tell the story, because especially because we also have this new story, which is pretty fascinating with French Bloom, where we try to make kind of like the first complex alcohol-free wine, which is a very difficult quest, but also very challenging, but very, very interesting. So,
I want to discuss, I want to go back a little bit. We're going to talk about Frerejean Frere, and then we want to talk French Bloom because it's a very important segment of our industry, and I want people to hear the story. But, you talked about Napoleon's army, and I love stories of Napoleon. I've studied him, and I've read some of the books, and here you are.
Movie?
I haven't seen the movie.
Well, the movie is not that bad, I think. I think it's pretty good. But I love.
Yeah, you good?
I like Joaquin Phoenix. I like Ridley Scott. I was pretty impressed. I'm a big Napoleon fan, so of course I watched the movie. But
did it jive with what you learned in history class in school?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's a little bit more like a big American productions, but it's not that bad. Honestly, the scene of the battles are pretty amazing. I think Joaquin Phoenix is amazing. So
I'm going to watch it because I just got done with a video of how he came to. It was part of my French lessons. What's cool about learning a language, and I learned the language because my father spoke, but you must immerse yourself in the culture to understand the language.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why these books like Veuve Clicquot, and I'm going to ask you a question later on a French doctor that came up with wine as a cure for most maladies. But it's so important to learn the culture of where you're trying to speak, so you have the feeling of it. And so that's why Napoleon has risen to the top.
I learned English thanks to my wife, because before, I don't say my English is perfect today, but I've been able to learn by going to Chicago and to be with my in-laws,
So the Frerejean Frere, how many generations ago, and is there any relationship to military accoutrements today. I mean, that was your great-great-grandfather or great-great-great-grandfather?
Yeah, so long story short, there were two brothers named Louis and Georges Frerejean. They used to come from a family of blacksmiths. In 1780, Louis went to spy the British. They were like entrepreneurs, they were not noble or anything. They were just entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And Louis went to England to spy the British for 3 years to learn about the technique to make good cannons. Because the problem is the French cannons at this time, they were kind of like exploding on the battlefield. And the British were quite advanced in terms of like technique to make good cannons. So, and he learned from the British to make good cannons, and he came back with a lot of know-how. And then they create the two brothers. They create like the cannons Frerejean Frere Champagne, and they became one of the biggest supplier of cannons for Napoleon. So this is a pretty interesting stories, and because we are two brothers, when we start our own maison in 2005, we took back the name and we took back also the cannons that we put now on our champagne.
What a great story. And I have this theory anyway about terroir and wine. These stories contribute to what's in the bottle, whether it's with cannon making or like my last name is Kalamkarian, and it means it's Armenian, one who etches silver. And it's a tradition. It's a part of my family's history. And so I think knowing those stories and that history, it's a philosophical approach to what you're doing. I mean, how can that history and your background not be in the bottle? I mean, how can that not happen? It's impossible because it makes who you are. And so why then in 2005 did you decide with your brothers that you would get into making champagne? And I understand the name source, but this is a tough racket.
Yeah, it is. It is, my friend. It is very tough to create a new
Everybody
house
always agrees on that.
Especially when you decide to make like a champagne with all the long discipline we put in place, which is we age our champagne from 5 to 8 years minimum. So that's even more complicated. Doing mostly Grand Cru, Premier Cru, that's a little bit more also. So we start in 2005 because at this time we met chef de cave. We met a guy named Didier Piasson, which is a wine grower from Avize. He's a 5th generation of wine grower from Avize, and very talented grower, good guy also. And like most of those wine growers, he was like selling partly his grapes to some of other big champagne house like Boulanger, like Paul Roger and all of that. And we really convinced him to join us. We also had some beautiful vineyards from our family, and so we decided to go together and start at the beginning like a small artisanal productions for family and friends. That was really the idea, to create like a boutique specialized mostly for us at the beginning, to say, okay, we're going to make beautiful champagne more in a confidential way. And from that, we start our first bottle in 2012. And we went from like 20,000 bottles in 2012 that we sold. And now we make and sell about 180,000 bottles per year. So it's still pretty confidential, but it's a good size. We don't want it to grow too fast or too big. We want to kind of like stay artisanal boutique, true to what we like to do. And that was kind of like this idea of Frerejean Frere.
You brought up the champagne houses. It's business, right? I mean, I have this weird romantic thing that wine shouldn't have a profit built into it, so that we can only get and produce the best stuff that the earth will give us. And I think it's really impressive that you guys are going after that, going after what the terroir, that if it's a bad vintage as far as weather and terroir is concerned, that's what it is. And so you're expressing that point. It's certainly palatable wine. It's good wine. I tasted some Chateau Lagrange the other day, and it was a couple of bad, not very good vintages for them. But boy, you get to taste what that means. And I think that's really fascinating about wine and now Champagne. But Champagne, the region of Champagne has been sort of an entrepreneurial, business-driven arm of the French wine business.
Yes, of course. I mean, sometimes my father told us like it is financially wrong what we're doing, because we aging so much the champagne. He says sometimes you should do like everyone in Champagne. You just age 2 years your wine, or sometimes 15 months. Use the minimum requirement. Why are you aging 5 to 8 years? Why you just do Grand Cru, Premier Cru? Why you do? And we say, Daddy, we do that for the long run. We do that for our kids, actually, because it takes a lot of time to build a champagne house. It takes a lot of time to create, all the reputations and all of that. But yes, it could be a good business when it's, of course, the big house are making a lot of profits and it's not necessarily easy because, you always have also this kind of like gambling aspect of sometimes you can do really bad vintage and sometimes you can have like difficulties. But we've been able to pass all those difficulties. We've been able to also grow. And we really pleased. We received some great rating. We received some 97 from Decanter, some 18 from Genesis Robinson, which is really great. But it's a really long fighting, long struggling also because you have to build the house. You have to make sure that. But it is my life story. Actually, is definitely making this champagne house with my two brothers. So there's a lot of passions. We are also creating a small hotel with like 10 rooms now in Aviz. So we slowly and surely build the house.
Will the rooms be ready by May?
Yes, sir. Honestly, if you come in May, we'd love to welcome you. The hotel the first part of the hotel will be ready. Okay, and so we will have our first type of room. So please be our guest.
That's very nice. We're going to Piemonte. We're going to and then we're going to drop into Monaco for the Grand Prix, and then we're going to head to Bordeaux, and then we're going to head to Paris, and then we're going to do day trips. But that's not why I brought it up. I was just teasing you.
I love Piemonte also. Beautiful area.
I'm looking forward to that.
Amazing place.
I read there's a book you probably heard of it. It's called Wine and War. The Kladstrup.
I read that. Really good.
Okay, and Mr. and Mrs. Kladstrup, by the way, live in Paris, in the 16th district. We had dinner with them not too long ago. And, there was this not wonderful, that's a bad term. There's this crazy story of the requirements of the Nazis during the war, which was a standing order of 1 million bottles of champagne a month for the Third Reich. I mean, crazy stuff, right? And there's stories of, and I brought this up because I'm leading you into this conversation. There's stories of, I guess they're entrepreneurs, providing the Nazis the crap. Let's be honest.
François, is it Clovis who told you this story? No,
I just read it in the book. They don't talk about any people. And then I read your website
because the brother of my grandfather, François Taittinger, during the Second World War, he was really giving like really bad champagne to the Nazis, and he went to jail because of that. No, honestly, he went to jail. Like get arrested. It's my grandfather who saved him because he was really trying to empoisoning the Germans with bad stuff.
Which is almost it's a great story, and I read it on your site, I think. But they didn't. The Kladstrups don't mention maybe they do François Taittinger. Maybe they do mention him. But anyway, I thought, okay, this is kind of like being part of the French resistance, right? Yeah. Like, well, I'm not going to fight them, and I'm not going to turn anybody in, but I can send them the lousy wine.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of like, they were. I mean, my grandfather lost his brothers fighting the Germans. He was
Wow.
like the most brilliant guy of the
Yeah.
family, named Michel Taittinger, and he just graduated from Polytechnic at 18 years old.
Wow.
He was supposed to be kind of like the big boss of the family,
Yeah.
and he graduated from this in the wrong time and so he had to defend, because he became an officer immediately, and so he had to defend the bridge of Paris with a
Wow.
regiment of soldiers from Senegal, and they all get killed by the
Wow.
Germans, and so that was like
That's
the
amazing.
hero of the family, and so I think this is why his brothers were really trying to fight against the Germans by giving them a really bad champagne to to get their revenge,
I think it's great. It's like a hero. He's like a hero,
Yeah.
a champagne hero. Is this history been written down? Did anybody sit with your grandparents, your great grandparents, and say, "Look, tell me the stories"? Or
Yeah,
they
I
just
mean,
handed down?
this generation is almost all gone now, but we still have book, and I would love to give you a book that has been written by the brother of my grandfather, Claude Taittinger, which I really love. He was an amazing guy. He was like the Clint Eastwood of the family, and he was always drinking his glass of champagne until he's 95 years old.
Perfect.
And he writes a very good book to explain this story called The Pleasure by Taittinger. I really invite you to read this. It was really interesting. It's all about the story.
I would love to read it. I've even been reading some French books. It takes me a little longer, but I do get them done. It's a very important part of the history. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier as well, that those stories and those histories handed down have to provide part of the philosophy of the wines that you're making today. I had May Eliane Lanquesang on the show, and she was 15 when the Nazis came into her parents' Chateau Comtesse de Lalande, and watched them shoot it up. Her uncle was in the resistance. They housed 3 Jewish families for 3 months, and then got them in Argentina through the resistance. I mean, these things, I think, it's actually part of what makes the French wine world different than the rest. American has great wines. In Argentina, make great wines. Chile makes great wines. I mean, Australia, they make great wines. But man, the history behind these stories, I think, are what set France apart. I have a romantic view of France as well, because it protects its butters and protects its cheeses and protects its wines. And of course, there are people that think the New World's more fun and exciting, but whatever. That's not our argument today.
You're right.
One of the things that it bothers me, it irks me, is the microscopic trends in the wine world. Wine's been around for thousands of years, as you mentioned, and we already know in Armenia there's a 6,000-year-old winery. The Dukes of Bourbon were making wines, who knows when, 2,000 years ago. But there's always this sort of contemporary things that go on. But non-alcoholic wine's been around a long time. I mean, I've tasted them probably 25 years ago.
Oh, really?
And they were not good. Yeah. And I'm fascinated to see online, socially, as well as in Google, the French Bloom brand, which is now your brand or your wife's brand. I'm not sure how you are the CEO of French Bloom. And what does she call herself?
She's a co-founder with.
The co-founder. Okay.
She's also CMO, so she's taking care of like marketing and all of that. But yeah,
tell me how that brand came about in your brain.
So the brand French Bloom came when my wife was pregnant. My wife was working for the Michelin Guide, actually. So it's funny,
really?
For an American, she was working for the Michelin Guide for almost 10 years in Paris, And so when she was pregnant in 2019, she kind of find like herself a little bit rejected from the party. And she actually married like a champagne guy. So she loved champagne and, And so from No, that was kind of the start of the thinking. And then from that, we get kind of locked down because of the COVID. So from this time, I've been able to think also, and I've been thinking about trying to do the challenge of experiencing and trying to use all the know-how we have in Champagne and trying to mix that with innovations and try to make like a good alcohol-free wine. The problem, as you say very well, is most of those alcohol-free wines are pretty bad and disappointing for one main reasons. Most of the time, it's always the same trap. People were taking just like a normal wine, a wine which is made to make wine, and not a wine to create an alcohol-free wine, Mm-hmm. And so all the entire visions we're developing with French Bloom is to really to rethink totally about the way you make an alcohol-free wine. And so you have to really rethink totally the vinifications from the beginning to the end. And this is perhaps, I think we are one of the only company doing really this, which is we don't just de-alcoholize any random wine trying to see what's happening. We're really making from the harvest. So for example, we do the harvest 2 weeks before everyone. We go to Languedoc to make French Bloom because Champagne is not made at all to make alcohol-free wine. But we find our own land in Languedoc, which is kind of like rebuilding our own AOC or own Cahier des Charges. I don't know how you say AOC in English.
Appellation.
Appellation. And so we're building our own appellations kind of in Languedoc, which is not a Languedoc wine, which is different. And so we discover after 4 years of R&D, and we are constantly doing research and development, trying to perfect, to improve. We are at the V8 right now on the Blanc and le Rosé. We're starting our first alcohol-free vintage, but we realize that we have to exaggerate all the components of the vinifications, because when you do the de-alcoholizations, you lose almost 60% of the aroma. So the entire game we are playing is to exaggerate we age the wine in oak. We try to re-acidify them using like some technique we have in Burgundy or in Champagne, like with acid tartaric. And the challenge is to do that with a wine totally organic, without sulfites also, in a natural way. It's super important for us to do, we do the harvest, for example, 2 weeks before. Why? Because we can get more acidity. And the good thing is in Languedoc, you can still do this and still have a high level of alcohol. We give more shoulder to be able to handle and support the de-alcoholizations when we lose about 60% of the aroma again.
I suppose from the early days of non-alcoholic wine, which were really just, I'm trying to think of when it was. There was a diet that swept the United States called the Scarsdale diet. I'm thinking late 70s. And he purported, look, you can go to a party and have non-alcoholic wine. You can go to a party and have a soda water with a lime instead of a cocktail, and this is how you're going to lose weight. And I think it's about that time that these things were being sort of thought through. But I have to imagine the technologies are completely different today, and that you are testing ideas, because I suppose the idea is you want the wine to taste as bona fide as possible, as regular as possible, as not something that you have to sort of swallow and make sure you drink because you need to, but you actually want to.
Yeah.
You want to enjoy it. You want to taste it. You want to feel it.
It's kind of like a blasphema what we're doing. There was when we start that in France at the beginning, we were really afraid to be lapidate, because in such a wine country world, and actually it's our number one market, and then it's US, our number 2 market, and US is becoming our number 1 market this year. But which is super interesting to realize that there is a big market need And this market need didn't really exist before. But now, alcohol-free beer are becoming almost 20% of the beer sold. You have like this really big shift in terms of consumptions also with like Gen Z who consume 30% less alcohol and all that. But the most important part of it is we are not against alcohol. I make wine, and the way we make French Bloom, the idea is to say we want to address propositions for flexi drinkers in order for them to be able to go from sometimes some wine, champagne, but sometimes they don't necessarily want to drink, so they drink French Bloom. And so our visions, 80% of our customers are actually flexi drinkers. And that's one of the biggest learning, we realize. People who want to moderate sometimes when you have a corporate events, even when you go to a fancy or gastronomic restaurant, you cannot always drink alcohol. I wish, but unfortunately you cannot just always drink alcohol. And the older you get, you have to also be careful sometimes. So one of our main quests is to say that if you get the pleasures and the complexity, is alcohol is the main reasons why you are going to drink a fine wine, not necessarily, you know what I mean? So I had these discussions with some of my friends, and some of them are not happy about that. And I like to be challenged because I understand also it's quite a very innovative point of view, because some of my friends are coming from the wine world say, I say perhaps one day we'll be able to recreate the equivalent of a Chassagne Montrachet. And they say, no, Chassagne Montrachet require alcohol. And they're right. Yes, Chassagne Montrachet require alcohol. But
to a fou, right?
Yeah. And so it is a complex quest, but it's very interesting.
I think that you're right on. I think that I love this term flexi drinker. I think it's important. We were in a trip last week in the East Coast, and my wife, for the first time in our relationship in 37 years, she ordered a mock cocktail. And I'm like, hey, whatever, she didn't feel like having a drink. She wanted to feel like she was socializing. Yep. And so she ordered a mock cocktail. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I totally get it. And I think you're onto that. I think you're onto the idea that the complexity, the experience, it's champagne, it's sparkling. I get to experience a glass, a tulip glass or whatever vessel they're using. And the next time I'll have a glass of Frerejean Frere.
Yes, we should have a glass of Frerejean Frere together.
Yeah. So now when you come to America, like you got this trip in LA, and you're going to see people, and your sister's doing it all the time. I see her all the time on Facebook and Instagram and everything. Are there initial objections to this idea from these people, or is everybody pretty much saying, yeah, you know what, I want to check this out, see what it's about?
For French Bloom?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, of course, you always have, when you have an innovations like what we're doing with the vintage Blanc de Blanc alcohol-free, the first vintage alcohol-free, when we age the wine in barrels, when we do all this work, and then we de-alcoholize the wine. Of course, every innovations would disrupt like a conservative industry, and wine is an extremely conservative industry. So of course we can get denigrate. Of course we are going to be kind of criticized, and this is normal, and we fine with that, because this is part also of like the process. And when I did one of my events in launching in Paris, there was a lot of journalists, and some really love it. I had a one, I couldn't say from which journal because I don't say anything, but he was very old school, and he arrived at the tasting with a big t-shirt say, I love Beaujolais, and I know that he was at the second I saw him, he was not happy about the concept. And I was fine with that because, I was actually pretty happy about that because I appreciate criticize, and I find that we are in the quest. We're trying to it is like almost like an alchemist quest,
Right.
We have
Yes.
to, but it is very, very interesting because there is a huge demand for that. People want now, when they don't necessarily drink alcohols, they want also to have nice mocktails, which is a high level of quality. They want to have an alcohol-free beer with a high level of quality. And the alcohol-free beers are getting to a pretty serious point. I don't know if you try some of them, but I must say it's not bad,
We had them at my dad's liquor store in 1975. I mean, there was
I have to get my charger, sorry.
No problem. Because we're close to being done here, which is unbelievable. So the other thing that happens around here that I interview people, and that is packaging options and canned wines, Tetra Paks, bag in the box, blah blah blah. And I see the convenience factor of that, but the question is, one woman, it was in here. I said, "Do you think Lafite, Petrus is going to be in a can one day?" And she goes, "Oh, absolutely." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
I'm not sure. That's
so the interesting question is the non-alcoholic segment growing to the point where it's going to be its own thing? There'll just be makers like you of French Bloom. I know of an Italian Prosecco that's like this. There's a whole bunch of other ones around, but you're making brand headwinds here, or headlines. Do the big houses across all industry, all wine appellations, whether it's Napa or Bordeaux or Burgundy, start to do this, or does it stay with boutique ideas like you, or do you think that they're going to go, "Hey, wait a minute, we got to jump in on this"?
I think they're all going to jump on it because they realize there's a big El Dorado on this. So of course, as you said at the beginning, like business bring and attract people, and they are seeing this, of course. But the biggest difficulties again is to rethink an appellations, to rethink like Bordeaux make Bordeaux wine. You know what I mean? Champagne make Champagne wine, and Champagne wine is made with alcohol, and with a very strict things. It's with the fermentations, and you have sometimes three fermentations happening in the barrel, sometimes in the bottle, of course, and so the big problem is, again, if you take a wine from Bordeaux, which is made to make a Bordeaux, and you try to de-alcoholize it, or a wine from Napa Valley, which is made to be normally a wine from Napa Valley, if you de-alcoholizing, usually it's very bad. So
that's right.
The biggest issue is to rethink about the vinifications, about the process to make the wine. It's not like beer, beer you can go from trying to make the same name with 0%. With wine, it's much more different because you have, of course, the terroir, you have the method of the appellations and all of that. So the way we're doing at French Bloom is we are not trying to make like a champagne 0%, we trying to make our own appellations with our own vinifications. So I believe that the best way to do it for the big group is to also rethink about pure brands, focus especially on this. There is few brands in Bordeaux who start to de-alcoholize their wine, and it's not that bad. I try a few things, actually from Saint-Émilion Grand Cru. I was
really
pretty impressed
wow.
that they've been able to do that. I don't know if they're going to be in trouble.
I don't know, man. That's well, I had a conversation with a Third Growth, I think, and owned by corporate Japan, so not a boutique, but left to his own devices to do what he wants with the brand. And that conversation is about brand value and creating a wine that people know when they buy it, it tastes like what it is, rather than trying to put on the shelf a wine that people are going to like every time. And so this is a totally different concept. But I'm thinking here, this is brand building. People are going to expect a certain level of quality from French Bloom every time they open it, and they're going to want to gravitate towards French Bloom because of that. And so you have to be very cognizant, like a winemaker of premium wine, of what you're putting in the bottle.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 50 minutes, which is unbelievable, and so I have to ask you a question.
Appreciate it. Very nice podcast with you.
Thank you. I've got a book the other day from my French teacher. Actually, she told me about it. There's a little video. Dr. Murray, Soigner. And I can't remember the name of the book, but it's the health benefits of wine. And the book I have, which I found in my father's library, is called "Wine is the Best Medicine." It's the same doctor. This is the English translation from 1974. So he goes through human maladies, and he comes up with a cure, I suppose. Maybe it's just to make you feel better.
We used to do in France, we used to give like cognac when you were sick in the early 20th century. We used to give like actually some red wine to the kids when they were going to for goûter in the 60s, 70s. We have this.
I did a podcast with Pauline Vicard, and she runs the Artisanal Global, which is a think tank for wineries. And I sent her a picture of an affiche de Béziers from 1932, and it was defending the consumption of alcohol in the form of wine. And then it says in French, you can give wine to your 4-year-old as long as you put a little water in it. It's okay. Anyway, so I'm going to read you. I'm going to read you a malady, and I'm going to give you 3 choices as to what Dr. Murray considers a cure, and then I'll read you the explanation. So, and there's 2 questions to it. One of them is going to be which wine, and then the dosage. How much did you drink to make sure you feel better? Okay. So we're going to use fever. So if you have a fever, would you have a Grave? Would you have a dry champagne, or would you have a Sancerre? This is the question.
For fever, I will say champagne, no?
Wow. You got that right. That's most of the time it's 33% get it right because, you got 1 in 3 chances. That's accurate. And so why? What do you think the reason is?
I think because the champagne go to the brain. And so I guess like they were like kind of like thinking that there is a link between the brain and the fever or something. I don't know. This is my kind of suppositions.
Okay. So that's not bad. That's not bad. You're Dr. Murray would be proud of you. I'm going to send you the link, by the way, to this video that I have. And you can watch it.
I try to cure myself pretty well, my friend.
Right. So the answer was this, because he says, because these contain, among other things, 2 important elements for a feverish person: phosphorus, which is eminently stimulating, and sulfur in its sulfate of potassium form, whose detoxifying action on the body has been established. So now, this is my best part. What is the dosage? How much should I drink?
2 glasses.
I learned this from your, by the way, this answer I learned from your cousin without the question, which was 1 bottle per day.
1 bottle per day.
So Clovis was all about the bottle a day. So
that's good. He's right.
Exactly.
He's a good man.
I mean, worst case is you may not get rid of your favorite, but you'll feel better anyway, right? An absolute pleasure, Rodolfo, to have you on the show. And so glad we got a chance to connect today. I know it's late for you, and you have kids there. So thank you again for being on the show, and look forward to seeing you in town. I hope you're so busy when you get here. I don't know how that's even possible, but.
Thank you very much, Paul. Looking forward to see you perhaps next week in Los Angeles. I'm going to contact you, and I hope to see you soon in Champagne, in Aviz. But really appreciate it. It was a great talk.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.